Hi, my name's Terry Dana Chikimiak II, and I'm the digital painter, and I've gotten a haircut. This vidcast is dealing with inking in ArtRage. Alright, so if you watched my inking in Photoshop vidcast, then you know that this is the same image that I used there. We're using that for consistency so you can see how inking the same image in different programs works slightly different. Now, if you have ArtRage, then you know that ArtRage has an inking tool, and you see it down here. I already have it selected. That's what we're going to be using. Now, I have it on no preset. It's as if you've just purchased ArtRage, you've just opened the program, and it is at its very default settings. We are going to adjust some things. Actually, I might have there we go. Now we're at the completely default settings. We are going to do some adjustments as we work through here so you can see what some of these do and how it affects how you're going to ink here. Now, the first thing that you're going to notice when using the inking tool in ArtRage, if I just lay down a line, you can see it's fairly smooth, fairly clean. Undo those. But there are settings that can adjust that. For example, we can turn off the anti-alias edge, and you see now we get more of a scratchy pen feel to it. Okay. Turn that back on. You can turn on square head, and it may not be noticeable at that size, but if we were to raise the size of the brush, now you can see that versus that. So it's really in the beginning and the ends. Now again, this is with the anti-alias edge. If we were to do it with the alias edge, at this size it's not quite as noticeable because of how big these inks are. But you can see a little bit of jaggediness, and if I were to zoom in, you'd be able to see it a bit better. See the blur along this versus the slight jagged there. Okay, zoom back out. Along with those settings, and I'm going to do a quick reset, the big one here is smoothing. Now, Photoshop doesn't have necessarily this type of smoothing ability, and what we're going to see is in some of the other programs, they have this similar smoothing ability, and depending on what you set it at, can affect how smooth your line is. So, for example, if I come in here, I'm just going to grab and shrink this down to about 15%. So if I do a line with smoothing at 10%, you can see, you still see a little bit of my bumps, my unevenness, how unsteady my hand is. Specifically in this area right here, there's a kind of bumps up and then bumps back down. If we were to take smoothing up to, say, 50%, and let's look at that same line, notice how it's a bit smoother, and on the end, it smoothed itself out. It's even more noticeable if you go down, let's go to 9%, and see it smooths the ends here. And if you jump your smoothing way up to something like 85%, did you see how it changed? Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to press down on with my stylus. See how jaggedy I'm making this is on purpose. And as soon as I lift up, do you see how it smoothed itself out? It's not perfect because I really kind of on purpose created these big jumps right there. But let me clear the layer. Some of the areas you'll see it are in circles. If you notice, okay, so I'm going, you see my beginning area smooths out really nice. Okay. There are other things that you can play with in here too. Taper bias. If we take that down to 0, and let's actually do this. There's a bunch of presets. So for example, here's billboard. Okay. Again, if we were to bring up our smoothing, we get a little smoother. Now, one of the things you have to be careful with in the smoothing, notice that the corners rounded out rather than keeping nice right angles. So if you're going to use a lot of smoothing, you really need to stop at each of your points if you want nice, hard 90-degree angles. Okay? Let's go ahead then and see what happens with the actual inking in here. I'm going to clear the layer again. I just reset us again completely. I'm going to take my size down to about, let's start at 10 and see if that's too big or if it's just right. We'll come up here. Too big. So we'll take it down a little more. Let's go down to 6. Still a little big for my taste. So we're going to take this way down to 3. Okay, there we go. Now this, my smoothing right now is only at 10%. And you'll notice, even there, it smoothed out the nose a little bit. Now, didn't smooth out that circle, so I'll go back and redo that again. Don't like that one. That one's okay. Okay, then you can always come back and erase where it goes in the reflecting area there. Because you do need to, see, I didn't like that one. That one's okay. Boy, circles, they're the bane of my existence. Only because I'm terrible at them. It just takes a lot of practice. And when you don't do a lot of circles often, you tend to fall out of practice. I'm going to zoom in a little bit and do a little bit of erasing in there. Okay. Now we can increase our smoothing, so I'm going to bring my smoothing up to like 65%. And you see how that's smoothed out? We'll do her whole. Now see, notice there, if you don't curve enough, it'll straighten out your curve a little bit, which can be a little annoying. Again, right there, we don't have quite the curve that I want, but for right now, we're just going to kind of go through. Now you notice I'm stopping at points that I want to be kind of more angular, not too rounded. And again, just like in Photoshop, you can definitely overextend and then erase back. I always suggest that. Notice it's also kind of tapering. So there's a good example. Notice there, with how high up my smoothing is, what I'm trying to do here is go around the foot and then come back through it, but it just straightens it out. So this is an area that you may want to take your smoothing back down. And that's much better. And even with that low smoothing right now of 18%, it's still cleaning it up nicely. And again, you can always use your eraser to clean up some of your connection points. Okay, let's see how that looks so far. And you can see nice clean lines. The smoothing really kind of enhances it. The one disadvantage, obviously, of the smoothing is it kind of takes away from that kind of hand-drawn feel that you get when you tend to not smooth. You know, that feeling that this was done by a human. Sometimes it might feel a little robotic. So you gotta kind of be careful about that. Now I'm not going to ink the entirety of her because we have already seen what she looks like fully inked. But I did want to get through enough so that you can kind of see what she looks like in this inking. Now if you wanted more variety in ArtRage, what you would end up doing is actually going down and using the sticker spray and building up something along those lines. Again, there's not a ton you can do. I mean, you have these settings over here, the smoothing, taper, length, bias, but to get some like rough textures and things like that, so it's not uber duper smooth, what you want to do is you want to create your own in sticker spray, because that usually works a little better. You know, it's funny, you use one program for so long, and then move to another one, and you forget all of your shortcuts in the first one. Okay, let's zoom her back out. And I'm going to turn off the pencil sketch so you can see. So you can see, I mean, it's a nice smooth. Your curves can get really beautiful in these areas. But again, it's a different way of working than in Photoshop. Remember, in Photoshop, it's all about your hand. It's about, you know, keeping your hand steady and getting, you know, long strokes may take longer to move across the screen. So this is ArtRage. Again, it has a bunch of presets, but if I'm inking something in here, I tend to create my own. Like, I'll go through each of these and try and get my inker to look exactly what I want it to look like, which is not always the easiest thing to do. Okay, like smoothing and taper length. See the taper length there? Okay, you can take your taper length way up and get a, you know, the problem there is you have to remember that you are getting really tapered at one end, because if you don't, now you get taper at both ends. That's adjusting the taper bias. Okay, these are all sorts of things that you have to play with. Okay. All right, that's it for this video. Yeah, like I said, if you haven't already, check out the inking in Photoshop as well. I'm definitely going to be looking at Clips Studio Paint and Corel Painter. Show you a little bit on how those ink. And again, this is mainly for people who like to ink their work, whether they're doing comics or like to do nice ink outlines of more traditional art. I generally just use it for comics, so that's what I'm kind of focusing on. All right, thanks so much, and I will see you with the next video. Take care.